Everybody's here. Yes.
You retained us.
I retained. Well, yes, I'm excited to talk about time and how to have an abundant attitude towards time. I'd love to hear what maybe you guys took away from this. If you'd spent any time meditating or wrestling with this scripture, unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards stand watch in vain. In vain you rise early and stay up late, toiling for food to eat, for he grants sleep to those he loves. What do you guys think?
I looked up, I knew kind of what vain means, but I wanted to know what it meant in this context.
Yeah.
So I looked up vain and toiling. I kind of knew what toiling meant as well. But, so basically what I felt like the Lord was saying is that, like, unless you do things unto the Lord, it will vanish. Like, it's not something that's going to produce anything. It's not something that is going to honor him. It's not something that is going to produce anything good unless it's done unto the Lord. Like, that's kind of what I was getting at.
Yeah.
Labors in vain, and then unless the city watches. So it's the God is who is the one who is in control of everything. So it says like the guards who stand and will stand and watch in vain, unless the Lord watches over the city.
Yeah.
So they're watching over something that they don't.
They can't really protect.
They can't protect.
Yeah.
It's only God that can do it.
Only God can do it.
And then it says, in vain you rise early and stay up late, toiling for food to eat. So that was to me like a lot of people don't have rest because they're just thinking about next, or with all the coveting, all these things.
Yes.
But as we are honoring God and do what God asks us to do, and just know that He is our God and that we're living for Him, He allows us to have rest. So,
Thanks, Bree. Anyone resonate with specific parts of this or pieces of this that you're like, oh, that hit me, or this part really hit home for me? What do you guys think?
I mean, for me, I think just living a purpose-driven life, and there's no purpose in your life if you're not living it for God and letting God live through you. So it's like if you're building whatever you're striving to do on your own accord for yourself, me focused, it's in vain.
Yeah, me-focused vision is very meaningless, really.
You soon come to find out.
Yeah. Chris, Manisha, anything from this verse that stood out to you?
I think my mind goes to like being led by the Holy Spirit, and like partnering with God and kind of consulting Him on the things that we do, the endeavors we take up, the jobs we get, the extracurricular activities. I guess I looked at like the description more as like an analogy. But I think the concept that came to me was basically living, being led by the Holy Spirit and making sure that you are always abiding in Christ when you're living out your life every day.
Yeah. Chris?
When I think of laboring in vain, I think of like a hamster wheel where you're just running and going nowhere.
Yeah.
And eventually you get tired and you pass out, but you've done nothing.
Yeah.
Whereas when you let God actually live your life, then He brings you to the right things to be able to work on.
Yeah.
And then you actually feel that feeling of accomplishment where you can be able to rest easy. You know?
Yeah. I've always been hit by this piece. The rise up early and stay up late, toiling for food to eat. That's something that I've struggled with in my life. And there's been seasons where, literally talking with mentors or counselors about like, allowing myself to sleep has been a struggle at times in my life, where it felt like if I was getting too much sleep, I was being lazy. I wasn't taking advantage of the day. I wasn't, and I think when I first got introduced to this verse, that was the piece that hit me. It was like every day I'm rising up early. I'm trying to toil away. And it was so, the toiling piece, just that useless vanity of over and over and over again. One of my close friends and business partners, he calls it the rocking chair of worry. Because I struggle with worry. I think sometimes this toiling anxiously for food, right? All these things, it's kind of that piece where it's like there's movement, but you're not going anywhere, right? The rocking chair going back and forth. I feel like that's my experience sometimes in life when I'm focused on what I want out of life and not what God wants. And my experience of time is different. And I think what's beautiful about the story of the Bible, what the gospel gives us is our life and our experience and our hope and our perseverance and our joy can be incongruent to our circumstances. So without God, I think a lot of times our circumstances define our reality. But I think with God, there's an aspect that you can have a house but not feel at home. But with God, I feel like you can not have a house and feel the security and safety of being at home. Or you can be in a marriage and not experience love. Or you can be single and feel fully loved. And I think there's numerous examples of that. But I think that applies a lot to our experience of time and what we'll talk about today. Because just kind of the quick review from last week, there's that big question of whose kingdom are you in? Whose authority are you under? Again, country, state, territory ruled by king or queen, realm, domain, dominion, all of these things. We look through the lens of physical bounds in our worldly definition of kingdom, or who is our literal president, leader. In America, we really like the idea of independence. We don't necessarily feel that sovereignty, even though we're technically under authority. But if we're thinking about God's kingdom, it doesn't matter where you live, what time you live, whose authority you're under, you can be living in that kingdom. So we just have the two choices, right? Earth, if we remember the video from last week, our space, the world, the present age, the age of sin and death. These are all terms that the Bible uses to describe kind of our worldly realm. And then we also have God's kingdom, right? The Bible uses terms like heaven, the kingdom of God, eternal life. There are all these things. And as we talked about last week, oftentimes we think that the Christian story is what we are saved from, which is death and an eternity in hell, which, yes, praise the Lord, we can be saved from that. But the hope from life just becomes, well, someday I will die and go up into heaven, which is this other place that I access once I'm dead. And the reality is no. There is a kingdom here now that God's building, and He's trying to renew the earth. And we can experience these same concepts of heaven, of eternal life. Those are accessible now, right? Is there still a realm outside of the earth? Yeah, there's God's space outside of here. Later they'll become one. But do we have access to that now? Yeah, we do. And really the class is all about how do we experience that abundant life. And based on this verse, that Jesus came that they may have life and have it abundantly. And we would define abundance as a life overflowing with Jesus. And what's beautiful about this is that it's not just abundant for me and you, because we have access to Jesus, but all those around us come in contact with Jesus and his abundance as well through us. So I'm not the source of abundance. I'm not the source of life. I'm not the source of peace. In my relationship with the Lord, living under his authority in his kingdom, I have access to limitless, his infinite love. And through that, people can see me in dire situations, in hopeless situations, and be like, how does he have joy? It's not my joy, it's Jesus' joy. And through that interaction, they can have access to that abundance from themselves through their personal relationship with Jesus, right? That becomes my mission on this earth, and part of what I'm designed for is kind of that temple, like we talked about last time, a space where heaven meets earth, a way that other people can interact and form a relationship with the Lord. So today we're talking about abundant time. I don't know if you're familiar with art, but I thought this one has a good example of just how, for me, when I first saw this photo in art history class in college, it's like, yeah, I feel like my experience of time is like that, just kind of, ugh. And I liked calling it abundant time based on this conversation from last week. But the reality is, it sounds counterintuitive, it sounds weird because time is fixed, right? We have 24 hours in a day, 160 hours a week, 365 days a year. What was the song, Chris? 521,000. 600 minutes, whatever it is. And yeah, it would be nice, we have those benchmarks in our days, weeks, years. And it'd be nice to assume that maybe we would have the average life expectancy, 79.8 years. Or maybe we'd have the most common year of death of 87 years old. But we don't know that either. This could be our last night. So we have zero control over the concept of time. And that concept of abundant time doesn't quite make sense through that lens of practicality, because after today, I can't show you how to create more time in your life. In fact, you're going to spend 2 hours to be here, plus your commute, and have less time in your life, right? But what is true about time, which I think you might agree, is our experience of time can vary enormously. So I can't have any more hours in the day than any of you can, but how I experience that time shifts. I, as a coach professionally, talk about time management, efficiency, effectiveness all the time. And there's so many people that can do things and live certain ways in a way that they accomplish more in less time. And the root of it all, from a professional sense, right, speaking from what I've learned professionally, is really it's about priority management. We can't manage time because you can't create more or less of it. You just prioritize differently. So obviously, in our lives, you could live to be 100 years old, and you could feel like your life was empty and it flew by. Or you could die young and live a rich, full, abundant life of meaning and purpose. So that's what we talk about today when we talk about abundant time, is not that we have any control over our time. We can't create more or less of it, but what we choose to focus on is highly impacting our experience of time. So, again, as a whole, this series of classes are talking about these three worldly resources we have that we can either build God's kingdom or our kingdom. We have our time today, right? We'll have talent next week. We'll have treasure the week after that. And time, other words to use for this is maybe our presence, our attention, our conscious awareness, our priorities. These things where we focus our time, where we put our attention, these are the things that we can control about time. We can't control the hours, the weeks, the years. That's for God to decide. So, the difference between the literal time that passes and our experience of that time. That's what we're going to explore today. And it's going to be through the lens of these themes, as we talked about last week. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but again, these concepts of the kingdom, heaven and earth, temples, our purpose, seeing God as a king versus a savior, having stewardship or borrowing our time here on earth versus owning our time, changes a lot. And we'll spend a lot of time talking about what the Bible says about this. So to illustrate this, I want to do an activity. And this is kind of to illustrate our ability to change how we feel in any given moment, like our state, so to say. Just as an example of how we might experience time differently. So a lot of times we can use our bodies, physical bodies, as a catalyst to support a feeling when we experience it. So I'm going to share some different words of states or feelings, and your goal in this activity is to attempt to feel these states of being, right, in your body. And notice how your posture, your voice, your eye direction might change with each state. So sit up, get ready, right? And I think what might be good, since there's just 4 of us, maybe pair into 2s, face each other, because we might be able to learn about what the state changes feel like by watching someone else. And then let's see, we'll pick a partner A and a partner B. So partner A, raise your hand. So we have Angela and then Manisha and Bree. Okay, so partner A, very simply, just think about a story from your weekend or something that you can talk about, right? And then as you're just having a casual little chit-chat, something that you're interested in, I'm going to say these different states. And both of you, partner A and B, I want you to try to feel that, okay? So it's going to be a lot simpler than it might sound. But just start chatting, talking about something.
Do you want us to like express it
Yep.
visually, physically?
So imagine, so for example, confident,
Okay.
right? So that's the first one. So as you're talking, try to feel, as you're interacting with each other, confident. Go. And then I'll say some other states.
So cute, right? We had a really great single party this weekend that I went to, and that was a lot of fun.
Now fearful. Now overjoyed.
It was just so fun. So many good food and kids running around.
Depressed. It's hard to be depressed when you're laughing at each other. Now loved.
But it was good fellowship. Surrounded by friends and someone who I really
Lost. Try powerful in who you're being. Take on power. Be powerful.
and then nobody was fine because they came back.
And concerned.
Concerned,
Concerned.
and I was nervous there for a minute.
All right. Yay. Well, yeah, sometimes I've done this one-on-one with people where I just have them close their eyes and feel an emotion. I thought it might be fun to work in partners, so I wasn't quite sure how effective that would be. But what changed about your body when you focused on feeling a certain way? Posture. Like, for example, maybe confident versus fearful. What did you notice about your body?
Make better eye contact, fearful, definitely looking down and concerned, slunched.
Yeah, maybe your eyes were shifty, your voice got softer, powerful, you got louder. It's kind of interesting. There's some themes, if you notice, it went from like confident, powerful, those type of loved, what we might call positive, to like fearful, concerned. And it's interesting overall, having done this exercise before. In general, physiologically, our bodies tend to actually display our vital, dangerous organs when we're confident and powerful. And we tend to crunch and protect kind of closer towards a fetal position in any kind of emotion that's more fear and anxiety. But what I wanted to show with that is just the connection between our psychology, how we're feeling, emotion, thinking, and our physiology, right? So your body literally shifted based on the state you were trying to take on mentally and emotionally. So our physiology, body's natural processes, for example, if you pull out your phone in the middle of the night, the light from your phone can trigger things in your retinas that start to make you start feeling awake. That's a physiological body response, right? Now, psychology, our minds, our thinking, our conscious aspects of us, so these kind of have a complicated, tangled relationship. And a lot of our reality is shaped by these physical interactions with our world, what we experience. So as you might imagine, different senses, sights, sound, taste. You might have smelled something and got brought back to a memory, right? Maybe there was a certain color to the sky that made you feel a certain way. Different music can bring lots of emotion to us. So regardless of what's going on in our minds, these stimuli in our physical bodies can create these responses. Another funny example I thought of today when I was talking to a client. I have a client who's on a trip to Puerto Vallarta, and that was the first place I ever went bungee jumping. But the second time I went bungee jumping, I actually jumped 5 times because they had a buy 4, get 1 free. And one thing I learned about that is everyone else was doing like 1 or 2 jumps. And so I thought I would just go jump, 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 jump. And after my 3rd jump, the guy goes, "You want to take a break?" And it wasn't until that moment that I realized, I was like, please. Because although I wasn't physically exerting much, I wasn't hiking, I wasn't rock climbing, I wasn't lifting any high weight, my body's response to thinking it was dying 3 times in a row, the stress response internally was tremendously taxing and exhausting on my body. And I was like, yes. I was like, I sat down, I drank some water, I ate something, because like even though I didn't physically exert, that connection between my psychology and my mind thinking, watch out, you're falling off a cliff, had a huge response on my physical body. So again, the point of all this is there's kind of an entanglement here. One thing I talk a lot about in coaching is that it's easier to act your way into positive thinking than to think your way into positive action. So a lot of times I do fun activities. I won't necessarily do these all with you right now, but some fun ones is you just do this. And it's hard to be just sad anymore. Or you take a pen, and I wish I had a pen up here with me. You bite on it and don't touch it with your lips. So what it causes you to do is do this. And it forces you into this massive smile. And you just suddenly feel better. Right? So you can act your way into positive thinking. If you're having a terrible day, you just throw your pen in there and you smile and you're like, it's so silly that I feel better. So, why I bring all of this up is because through this class, we're going to learn about how God shifts our view of time based on what He asks us to do in our rhythms and in our lifestyle. So we'll look later at Leviticus, and you may not have had many teachings based on the book of Leviticus, but look at, based on some of the rhythms that God created for the Jewish or the Hebrews to follow, it would have produced a different experience of time. So, first, I did want to review from last class some of the things you guys had brought up when we talked about this topic of time as we get into this. Bree, you talked about how time is limited, 24 hours a day, but how God created time, and His time is not the way that we think of time. We'll get into that. Manisha, you talked about how the difference of worldly time, never enough, fast, fleeting, versus a spiritual version of time that's abundant and almost slower, right? There's this eternal perspective versus this finite running out. Angela, you talked about how time is somewhat of a human construct. Like a lot of how we experience time are things we've created, like clocks, seconds, minutes. These are all things that humans have kind of created. The concept of being late, these are things that we have done. And you also mentioned how some of us are trapped in the past or trapped in the future, but really spiritually it's just about the now, right? What we're actually in. A lot of times one of my favorite, if you ever heard of Oswald Chambers, My Utmost for His Highest, I think it's July 28, but it talks about how God doesn't put us through things to prepare us for some kind of goal, right? It's not about an end result. It's about the journey and what that's developing in us, the character, and how it's making us more like Jesus. That's what God really cares about, is the now, right? The process that we're going through. It's not that, someday I'm going to solve these problems and God is going to heal me of this. It's like, what is God doing in your heart through this sickness or through this frustration? And then, Chris, you talked about the powerful difference between chronos, the clock time, versus kairos, the seasons, the moment, the occasions. And you also mentioned Ecclesiastes and how there's a season for everything, a time for everything. So again, diving deeper into that, what are some other things about the worldly view of time? What else do you think fits in kind of the world's view of time, if we're trying to put words to your day-to-day experience, frustrations, the goods, the bads, all of it? What would you say about the worldly view of time? Anxiety. What else comes to mind?
Using time to our benefit, such as like compounding interest.
Yeah. How can I get the most out of my time? Compounding interest. I've felt ever so guilty knowing that if I'd put money away at 19, imagine how much would be there right now, right? Now I've waited, Kind of squeeze all we can out of time, right? Let's get the most out of it. Let's compound the effectiveness over time. What else?
I think when you were saying that whole, like when you were just doing the whole thing, it reminded me of like ego and like something about our human nature wants to like conquer all this and like be all productive, and it's just kind of like, it's kind of egotistical in my opinion.
Yeah, there's a term like hustle culture.
Yeah.
I think kind of fits into our worldly view of time in modern times, right? It's like, I think Elon Musk was quoted as saying that if you want to, it's like nothing of meaning is accomplished in life in 40 hours a week, something like that, right? I should find his actual quote. I wish I'd prepared it. But yeah, there's a lot of people that will say if you want to live a meaningful life, you can't do that in 40 hours. You should work 80, right? Like, there are people out there, and a culture out there that is preaching a gospel that, until you want to succeed as bad as you want to breathe, you're not going to be successful, right? E.T., right? I love that video, but I have trouble with that. Like, there's part of that video, it's like, some of you aren't successful because you like sleep too much. Maybe you have to stay up all night to have success. And it's like, yeah, that's very motivational, but is this godly wisdom or worldly wisdom, right? There's this concept of hurry, right? When you think of hurry, like I mentioned, if you want to deep dive into this, a lot of what I thought I would talk about when I was planning this class originally comes a lot from what I've learned from the two books, Ruthless Elimination of Hurry and To Hell with the Hustle, and that podcast, Fight, Hustle, and Hurry. Very easy, simple listen. Suggest you all subscribe to that. It's 10 episodes, like 30-minute episodes. But hurry is kind of this. The other morning, I backed into a neighbor's car, right? On my way here, I had to meet George at 6:30. I'm just pulling out of my driveway. I have a backup camera. Like, my car will literally stop itself. Wow. It has that tech where it's like, whatever reason, I'm just like, and then I just backed up into my friend's or my neighbor's car. He has a steel bumper on his Dodge Ram. Nothing. I left him my number, told him what happened, didn't say anything. My poor little plastic bumper. My nice new car, now I have this thing. Because I was in a hurry, right? Hurry is not, it's like a hurricane. And this is what our life feels like sometimes. We're trying to fit everything in, and we become these worse version of ourselves. Then hustle, right? This hustle culture, this maximization, optimization, get everything out of life, squeeze it, right? Like, this is a lot of what we hear in the world about time. Successful people. Bree, what were you going to say?
I feel like time sometimes for me it's like conflict, because it's like I have to go to work but I want to be over here, or I have to, or I'm at work but my kids have like a sporting event, but then I'll have to leave work to go to that, so it feels like sometimes conflictual to me, time.
Yes. Yeah, one of my favorite quotes about that concept is from this book called The One Thing by Gary Keller. It's about like, you just pick one thing that's your priority. But it says, I won't get it perfect, but nowadays we have more decisions that we have to make in one day than our ancestors made in a lifetime. And if you think about the reality of like the abundance that we technically do have in our society, the conflict is there. Like, I think for a while in my life, I lived under this idea that my to-do list would end. And I finally learned that to-do lists don't end. I make some progress on it, and then I get more things to do. And that's the reality, is that it's priority management, like I talked about earlier with time management, is we have to make decisions about what's important, because we can't do it all. There's too many movies. There's more hours of YouTube content uploaded to the internet every day than we could perceivably even comprehend, right? There's too much. So that's a struggle with time, is we have to say no or yes, yeah?
And then there's one more that when it comes to time, it's kind of like you were talking about Kairos moment. Like when it comes to worldly time, I feel like you're supposed to go to school, after go to school, you're supposed to get married, after you get married, you're supposed to have kids, after you get kids, you're supposed to have grandkids and retire and have your retirement, and like, so that's another
The expectations.
of like, your ages and where you're supposed to be, what you're supposed to be doing, like that's another worldly view of time, I think.
I've felt that a lot. As a coach and someone who works with people older than me often, they say, you have kids, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm not married, right? Like, there's this feeling that I've felt for many years of like, oh, I'm not as mature or experienced. There's something I'm missing because there's this expectation on my time, or the classic question of, oh, why are you single? There's almost this like, there's something wrong with me that I don't have this thing that, based on our worldly expectations, I should have by now.
But then some people do that, and then they just do it because you're supposed to, and then it causes more conflict.
Yep.
So
And again, a lot of this is filled with scarcity. Not enough, never enough, right? There's abundance. The antithesis of abundance would be scarcity. There's only so much to go around. I have to grip and hold onto every moment because I don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. And you realize what's interesting is that even when people are at the worst and their time is most limited, or maybe they're terminal or fighting cancer or something like that, sometimes with a healthy relationship with the Lord, they have like an abundance to them and a freedom to them that those of us that probably still have 50 years left in our life don't have. So again, there's a vast difference of what we have accessible through God. If you were at church on Sunday, I loved that section of Romans that George talked about in Romans 1. There's a whole section in the end about, for although 21 through 23, or actually, I'll read a little bit further. But Romans 1, starting in verse 21, for although they knew God, they did not honor him as God. So again, this is this concept of, is God your Savior? Is he your King? Right? Honoring God as God means I am submitted to his authority. I don't just know who he is. Even the demons know God, right? And they shudder. So they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools. A lot of these worldly ideas of time come from people claiming to be wise, but I would say they're kind of fools for killing themselves, working so hard for nothing. And they exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. So again, we're in our time, it's not going to be like an idle, direct illustration like he's talking here with Romans, but we're exchanging this glory of what God has intended for us for something finite and pathetic. And what we see as our lives and what is capable in our time is so much less than what is accessible through God. So therefore God gave them up to their lusts, to the lusts of their heart, to impurity, to dishonoring their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth of God for a lie and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. So it goes on to talk about how he gave them up and they were consumed, committed shameless acts. And I think I see a similar thing when we talk about time, right? There's a truth of God in how we should go about living our life. And a lot of us are exchanging that truth for a lie, exchanging something eternal, that relationship with God, that meaning, that purpose, for something finite, what we think we're going to get out of hustle and hurry. We believe that creation offers more pleasures and satisfaction than the Creator. We look to natural pleasure for fulfillment versus the Creator for ultimate satisfaction. And a lot of that deals with our time. There's this story, I think I heard it first in a documentary about minimalism. I think Tim Ferriss made this popular in his book 4 Hour Workweek. But he calls it Mexican Fisherman. I don't think that's the most PC title, but it's just like a fisherman, right? So there's the story about this businessman from America that goes on vacation. And he's trying everything he can to get away from work and escape the hustle. So he flies to some South America, Central America country, and he's hanging out on this kind of secluded, beautiful fishing village. And despite his efforts to escape the work and the hustle, he finds himself needing to take an important call. And so he walks out on the pier and is taking this call, and it's kind of the middle of the day, 11, 12, 1, kind of that time of day. And he sees a fisherman coming in from fishing. And the fisherman has a lot of fish. And he hands up his call and he asks him, did you catch that all just now? He's like, yeah. He's like, what are you going to do now? And the fisherman says, well, I'm going to go to market, I'm going to sell it, and then I'm going to siesta, spend time with my family, drink, play some guitar, and enjoy the rest of my afternoon. And so this American businessman goes, wait, if you caught that much in those few hours, if you just worked a little bit longer, you could catch more. And with that extra money, you could buy another boat and hire a team. And over time, you could scale this thing and then get a headquarters in America and eventually sell your company for millions of dollars. And you could move back here and hang out with your family and siesta and drink and play guitar. And it's just so funny to see it that way. But again, the reality is this silly story, he had figured out how much work to satisfy his need. And the American businessman had this whole culture, this societal pressure, this hustle of a limitless, one thing that's true about humans is we have limitless desire. There's an inability to satisfy our desires. And there's a finiteness. There's only so much food I could eat. So many places I could be at once. All these things that I would make money to do, there's a limit to my ability to enjoy those. But my desire is infinite, and it's limitless. So a lot of humans fall into the cycle of trying to satisfy their own finite desires or limitless desires, and they're just caught fighting this journey, like that American businessman, of hustle, hustle, hustle for most of the life, if you get lucky enough to succeed at that level and sell it, and then one day you can relax and rest. Versus a lot of what we see and what God commands us to do is he wants us to have rest now. He wants a pattern and a rhythm of rest in our life. But we see that and we read it in the Bible and we say, I couldn't do that. That's not for me, God. So, again, if we look at God's view of time, and I don't have any cool picture for this, but we have all the time in the world. What are we stressed about? Like, why do you think that thing that's on your mind right now is all that important? In the scope of eternity, with an author and creator God who loves you, is it really anything of significance to worry about? And there's these questions about how much of our time should be honoring God. And how can we recognize if we aren't honoring God with our time? Right? And if we look at the practices that God outlines for us in the Bible, they all require trust. And if you think about the only way to build trust is doing something that requires trust. Right? If I've just met you, you don't know anything about my trustworthiness until we've been put in a situation where you see what I'm really made of. Right? That's when you can actually learn how to trust me. So a lot of times we live our life in such a way where we don't do anything that actually requires any trust for the Lord, and we don't trust him because we've never stepped out and done anything risky. So a lot of what the Bible talks about in terms of rhythms and routines, they go against the logic of this maximization. A lot of the godly view of time is margin, right? There's excess. Jesus was interruptible. This is one of the things, attributes, things I've noticed about how Jesus lived his life that's hard for me at times. I'm got things to do, places to be. And Jesus is over here trying to save someone's daughter who's dying, and some lady who's been bleeding touching him. I know I would have been like, so what? I healed her. Let's keep going. I got to save this kid that's going to die, right? But he pauses, and he has this beautiful moment, one of my favorite stories, Or he actually interacts with this woman who for 12 years of her life was unclean. And if we know what that means, the literal living as an unclean person, being separated out of community, you couldn't touch. Imagine not being hugged for 12 years because you were unclean. Right? This is what this woman was suffering, and Jesus was interruptible enough when he was going to help this powerful, important centurion, I believe was the guy, Jairus, that he was going to help. I know in our worldly view of time, what's the better use of my time? This poor, unclean woman who's been sick for 12 years, that's suffering, and no one can help her, and all the doctors tried and failed? Or this powerful Roman centurion, the world power of the time, who I could really help and probably get something from him? I know what my worldly mind would pick as the priority to do with my time, but Jesus was interruptible. You look at, there's this whole story about him sending out the 72, and they go to all these places and they do ministry and all this stuff, and then they come back and they're just talking about all the cool things, and there's literally this part that says, and I don't remember how it says it, but it was like they didn't have time to eat, right? Because there's all this commotion and all these people are coming back. And Jesus tries to get out of that place to go be alone with his disciples. And when he crosses the sea, guess what he runs into? The feeding the 5,000 opportunity, right? This is Jesus after, I got to get some R&R, I got to escape all this craziness. I'm going to just have some quality time with my disciples, my bros, get in a boat, let's get out of here. People run, meet him on the other side, and there's 5,000 men. Who knows how many total people? And they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he said he had compassion. And he stayed and he taught them. He didn't just teach them, he figured out how to feed them. So again, Jesus was very interruptible. He had a mission, he had priorities. There were other times where the disciples were like, found him after quiet time and were like, Jesus, hurry, people are waiting to be healed. And he was like, we have another place to go. And he went on to the next city, right? He wasn't tied to these different things that I feel like in my human perspective, I would have made much different decisions than Jesus did. So again, a lot of what the Bible talks about goes against the logic of how do I maximize. And we want to be able to strengthen our muscle of trust to free us from these false gods. Because really, where's our time going? Our time is going to things that don't matter. These false gods. I can't give you any more hours in your week, literally, but I can free you from the bondage. Well, I can't. Jesus can. Free you from the bondage of these idols that are consuming your life, that you think are so valuable, that will give you purpose and meaning, bring something to your life, when really they're empty and meaningless. So, I want to dig into Leviticus. I think it might be good for a little shift of energy. If we want to do a little break or something like that, I have a video that I was thinking of saying, either doing it in the middle to give you a summary of what we're about to talk about, or at the end after we've talked about it. But I feel like, hey, let's shift the energy a little bit. Let's watch a little video, and then we'll come back, open our Bibles, and dig into some Leviticus. Some, super exciting, riveting Leviticus. So this is a video on the Sabbath. Oh, I did not double check the sound.
What did you say? This is a video on
The Sabbath.
the Sabbath? Interesting. My mind was thinking about that a little while ago.
I just messed everything up.
Instead, we find ourselves working endlessly, fighting back chaos.
I'm going to start it over. I just like this because it gives a lot of good imagery. It's kind of a poetic way of... There we go. Loud enough?
The number 7 is a big deal in the Bible.
Yeah, in biblical Hebrew, the word 7 is connected to the idea of fullness or completeness.
And that's something we all long for, but don't often experience. Instead, we find ourselves working endlessly, fighting back chaos with no real rest.
Yes. Now keep all that in mind as we turn to Genesis 1 in the Bible. It begins with darkness and disorder, but then God speaks to bring about light and order so that life can flourish.
And this happens over the course of 6 days.
Each day is marked with the phrase, there was evening and there was morning. But on the seventh day, something special happens.
God stops and rests.
Right. Creation is brought to its completion on the seventh day. And that phrase, there was evening and there was morning, it doesn't appear on day 7.
It's like a day with no end.
On the seventh day, God's presence fills his creation. The land provides for all of God's creatures, including humans, who are appointed to rule the world with God forever.
Kings and queens of the 7th day rest. I can get into that.
But the humans are deceived by a dark power, and they forfeit that rest. They're exiled into the wilderness, where they have to work as slaves to the land.
Until they die and return to the dust from which they came.
But God wants to restore humanity back to that seventh day rest. So he chooses to give the family of Israel that experience of ultimate rest so they can share it with others.
But how? They're in Egypt, slaves to an oppressive empire who's grinding them into the dust.
So God confronts Egypt and he liberates the Israelites, taking them through the darkness and chaos on the way to the promised land.
Now, while they're on their way, they find themselves in the wilderness. It's easy to get lost, life is a struggle. They're not in the land of rest yet.
But while they're on the way, God invites them in the wilderness to start living as if they're in the promised land.
But how do you practice the future rest in the wilderness?
Well, God tells them that every seventh day they are to stop their work, or in Hebrew, to Shabbat, so that they can rest and enjoy God's good world.
So take a whole day to live as if the ultimate rest has already come.
Yeah, this is the Sabbath, celebrated every week on the seventh day. But there's more. The Sabbath is just one of 7 festivals that Israel practiced every year, each one anticipating that seventh day rest.
That is a lot of 7s.
And there's even more. Every 7 years, the Israelites were to liberate slaves, forgive debts, and let the land rest for a whole year. And then, every 7 times 7 years was the ultimate seventh day rest, called the Year of Jubilee. If anyone had lost their land or gone into debt, all was forgiven, everything restored.
Wow, so the Sabbath, these feasts, the year of Jubilee, it's all pointing towards the hope of future rest.
Right. Now, when the Israelites went into the land, they forgot their God, and so they forfeited their chance to rest in the promised land.
They're exiled and enslaved again by an oppressive nation, led back into a world of chaos and disorder.
But Israel's prophets said that their exile would end one day, and that the ultimate jubilee of freedom and rest would come, but generations go by, and they're still waiting.
It's at this dark point in the story that Jesus appears, and he launches his public mission on a Sabbath day.
Yeah, he read aloud from the scroll of Isaiah, saying that it was time for all captives and slaves to be released, because this was the year of the Lord's favor.
What did he mean, this is the year of the Lord's favor?
He was talking about the ultimate jubilee.
So Jesus is claiming that seventh day rest would come through him.
Right, he said that he was the Lord of the Sabbath, and he confronted disorder and darkness in all of its forms, liberating people from sickness, sin, even from death itself.
Yet, Jesus was killed, so even his work was undone.
Well, it seemed that way. But notice, Jesus timed his death to take place at the end of the week. His body rested in a tomb during the Sabbath, and on the 8th day, he rose from the dead.
Oh wait, the 8th day? You mean the first day of a new week?
Exactly. Jesus' resurrection was like the first day of a new creation, where God's light and life broke into the darkness.
So because of the resurrection, we have hope in God's promise of future rest. But we're not there yet. It's like we're still in the wilderness, where we experience struggle and pain.
But as we journey towards that ultimate seventh day, Jesus invites us to experience a taste of real rest now by following him. Or in his words, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest."
So, I love how it says they wanted, while they were in the wilderness, to start living as if they were in the promised land and as if they were in the rest. And that's our current reality. We're not of this world. We're living in an exile. We're in a wilderness. Like I said earlier, some people are hoping one day I'll die and get to go to heaven, and then there I'll find my rest. But God invites us in His Word to practice rest now. It's not going to be complete rest. Eventually, we'll get to experience that. But for now, He's inviting us to experience a taste of that. So, if you want to follow along with me, Leviticus chapter 23. And it's funny how God works. Like I said, I'd planned a lot of other things to talk about today, but I just so happened to read this in my reading last week and was like, well, here we go. This makes sense. And I really wanted to, there's so many implications to some of these things. I wanted to break them down and study when does this feast actually happen in the year and all of these things. I didn't have time to do that before today, but the invitation is I want to show you guys, instead of doing all that work before you and giving you some pre-chewed food here, I figured I want to show you and get you started on this journey to seek out abundant time for yourself. So, if you look at Leviticus chapter 23, again, the big things is there's these sacred days and these festival days. And these are how God kind of helps Israel experience His rest. So I'll just kind of read through it and we'll pause at each of the different ones. Like it said there's 7, which is cool, 7 festivals they were to experience all throughout the year. So the Lord spoke to Moses saying, "Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, these are the appointed feasts of the Lord that you shall proclaim as a holy convocation. They are appointed feasts." So these are holy, they're set apart, they're appointed by the Lord, and they're feasts. Number 1 is the Sabbath. Sabbath fascinates me. We watch advertisements on TV about people relaxing and enjoying, and we're like, oh, that looks so great. I want to go to a sandals resort, and God is literally saying, have that every week. This is what I'm asking you to do. And we go, no, I can't Sabbath. It says 6 days work shall be done, but on the 7th day is a Sabbath of solemn rest, a holy convocation. You shall do no work. It is a Sabbath to the Lord in all your dwelling places. Now, Sabbath shows up a lot of places. If we go to Exodus, it's in the 10 Commandments. And I don't know if you've thought of this, but it's the highest word count of any commandment. I think it's kind of important, right? So where are we? 10 Commandments. Yeah, I'm just figuring out, why am I blanking? Oh, there it is, chapter 20. So, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, or your male servant or your female servant, or your livestock or the sojourner who's within your gates. For 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, and the sea and all that is in them, and He rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath and made it holy. Fascinating. It's not just us who are resting, but we're creating an environment in which other people then rest. Our servants, our livestock, they are to rest too. What's unique about our culture, we used to live in a culture that had Sabbath. I think 1969 was the first year that a 7-Eleven was open on a Sunday. Fascinating. Before 1969, there was nothing open on a Sunday. Wild. Yeah. Seventh-day Adventist, yep.
Yeah, and so we were kind of raised like Baptist, and then like my dad ended up converting to Adventist, and it was always like a hot topic in our household because it was like, oh, you guys are just like making us just rest on, you know, like, as kids we were like, this is crazy, like it just, as kids we felt like it was like cult-ish.
Mm.
But what's interesting about the denomination is they're very hyper-focused on the day, like it being Saturday
Mm.
and not Sunday. And there's like this idea that if they honor the Sabbath on Saturday, like that's the day that's holy.
Mm.
And that's the day that's like sets them apart from the other denominations. And I've always struggled with that, and it's kind of funny because like Sabbath has always been like this constant theme like throughout my life since my parents became Adventists. So I'm just kind of sitting here tripping out that we're talking about this.
Well, yeah, it's something to dig into. I've listened to a whole podcast on it. There's a Garden City is a book about Sabbath. Fascinating about the Adventists. So I think even though we might not get things perfectly, God still blesses aspects of it. Just a side note that I heard, I don't want to make a big point out of this, but the highest life expectancy happens to be Seventh-day Adventists. And if they took the amount of days that taking a Sabbath for the average life expectancy of your lifetime would add up to, that's how much longer on average they live than the normal person.
You know why also?
Which is like, again, it's just like, hey, I fascinating. I didn't do the study. I don't know all that stuff, but it's like, imagine it's like the implications of like, oh, they were given that time, even though you thought you lost it resting, they lived longer.
Isn't that like in an hamburger too, they close on like 7th day and they make more? I heard
Chick-fil-A.
And or some we have
Yep.
in an hamburger, Chick-fil-A, so they make more money than all the other ones. And
So
that's
again,
that day, just honoring God.
there's a way to look at God's commandments through a prosperity gospel lens of like, oh, I'm going to take a rest and God's going to bless me and I'm going to make more than the other restaurants. Not really how Sabbath works. We'll get into it, but what's fascinating, if someone with a phone can Google where the Ten Commandments are in Deuteronomy, I just wanted to contrast the Sabbath in the Exodus Ten Commandments because it's different in the Deuteronomy Ten Commandments. I'm just struggling in my Bible right now to find it. Oh, there it is. It's chapter 5. So, if you read why the Sabbath here, right, it talks about it, and then verse 11 in Exodus says, "For the 6 days Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that's in them, and he rested the seventh day." So he blessed it and made it holy. So Exodus, we're looking at the Lord and creation. We are his image bearers. We are living out that rest, similar to what it talked about in the video, right? That God rested on that day. That is the completion, right? He built it, and now it's complete, and he's resting. So we are imitating that. The Sabbath kind of came out of creation. Now, if you go to Deuteronomy 5, you go to verses 12 through 15. Observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy, as the Lord commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, and the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do on it, you shall not do any work, you, your sons, your daughters, your male servants, female servants, your ox, your donkey, any of your livestock, the sojourner within your gates, your male servant and female servant may rest as well as you. Pretty much identical. Check this out. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. What's different? Exodus and Deuteronomy. Why are they Sabbathing here? What is the, if Exodus about, God created for 6 days and he rested 7, so you Sabbath because God made that day holy. Why are they Sabbathing in Deuteronomy?
Do you remember?
What?
Their slavery or how God rescued them?
Yeah, it's not too complicated. So again, it's like, you think about, right? Exodus is when they got saved, and they wandered in the wilderness, and the Deuteronomy is Moses retelling the law before they crossed the Jordan in the Promised Land. And now, Sabbath is almost this celebration of freedom. We are no longer slaves. There's a lot of similarities in this story of Israel and Egypt and our story of being slaves to sin and death and God saving us from that. So this concept of Sabbath is actually a holy day, a holiday. If you get excited about celebrating the holiday of Christmas, imagine having 52 a year, 52 of them every single year, right? And it's a celebration that I am not a slave. I was once lost and dead, and now I'm free. It's actually resistance. Stick it to the man, right? No, just kidding. But that's what Sabbath, it represents a lot of things. But just like we talked about with that Chick-fil-A story, the temptation, if I were Chick-fil-A, is like, man, I'm doing better than all these 24/7 restaurants. How much more could I make if I stayed up and open another day and maybe extended my hours? And you have to imagine, Israel was different. They were set apart. A lot of these commandments were to make them holy, different, set apart. Imagine being in a walled city in Israel, and the Sabbath day you close the walls and everything shuts down. And guess who shows up but a merchant, ready to buy goods, money in hand. Hey, do business with me. And you couldn't. It was the Sabbath. Imagine the temptation. It's right here, Lord. It's free money, basically. He's going to buy my goods, right? That's the challenge that we're going to wrestle with if we try to implement a Sabbath in our life today, right? Whether it's Saturday, Sunday, 24 hours, whatever you want to do, right? I don't want to spend time today getting into the weeds of specifics. I know for me, that's something that's a big part of my intention in this new year, is developing a Sabbath practice for myself. And it's great because it was evening and then it was morning. So a lot of people Sabbath, they open it up with a meal, a communal experience. Sabbath isn't me isolated by myself. It creates this sense of community, sharing in a meal right before we go to bed. We're kicking off in Sabbath, in rest. It rewires our week. There's aspects of sleep, right? And imagine the tension you build up over time and actually be able to take that. And again, there's certain people that don't have the ability. They're working 2, 3, 4 jobs. And people that Sabbath should be able to invite them in and help them create rest in their life. Right? This can expand if people actually start doing it. And again, we don't have time to go so in depth, but that's just verse 3, right, about the Sabbath. This was the first in their 7 feasts to the Lord, but it was a weekly rhythm. Again, if you talk about how our physiology and our psychology is linked, we talk about how we can't change literal physical time, hours, years, all of that, but we can change our experience of time. Just imagine your life as an ancient Israelite actually following this practice and obeying the commandment of the Lord, and what that would cause a difference in your experience of time. Right? Just think about the freedom and the joy and the fullness that comes from that. And there's more. Then we have the Passover, right? There are appointed feasts to the Lord, a holy convocation, which you shall proclaim at the time appointed them in the first month, 14th day of the month. So we're kicking off our year, basically, with this Passover. On the 15th day of the same month, you have the Feast of Unleavened Bread. The 14th day is the Passover. And I won't get into all of the details or read what that is, right? We're going to slaughter a lamb. We're going to eat this stuff. We're going to have our sandals on our feet. We're going to be ready because it's a celebration of remembrance. A lot of what Israelites practiced, all of these things we'll see throughout here, was to remind them of God's goodness, to put them in a posture of gratitude, to remember what was done for them. Oftentimes, our broken worldly view of time is because we're just thinking about the past or the future and what's next and how I messed up. And all of these festivals are designed to reflect on the power and the goodness of God and who He is in their lives. So we have this Passover, that's that meal in the evening. And then on the 15th day, it kicks off the Feast of Unleavened Bread, that for 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. That's not fun, right? Like, that's not as good. It's a feast, but you're eating unleavened bread. The first day, you shall have a holy convocation. You shall do no ordinary work. You shall present a food offering to the Lord for 7 days. And on the 7th day is another holy convocation that you shall do no ordinary work. So again, I would love to dig into what this would look like and the implications of the time of the year. Didn't have time to do that before today. But that's the Passover. That's this feast. Now we've got the first fruits. The Lord said to Moses, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel. Say to them, when you come into the land that I give you and reap a harvest." Right? This is stewardship, not ownership. If you're looking at this promised land as something that God gave you, you shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of the harvest to the priest. What is a first fruit? So if it takes 10 days, tithe means tenth, right? This is not saying tithe in this, but if you're thinking of those concepts of tithe and first fruit, if it takes 10 days to harvest my field, the entirety of that first day would be my first fruit. It's the first harvest. I'm bringing that to the Lord. What happens on day 2 if there's a storm and hail or locust? It's not, I'm going to give a portion of the total once it's done and I know I'm secure. It's I'm giving the first. If I'm giving the firstborn, who knows if that sheep is going to have any other babies? I'm giving the first. I'm not waiting until all of them are born and then out of my security and what I know, I'm going to give Lord, okay, I could spare this one, God. So again, for us, when we look at these practices of generosity, and we'll talk more about this in the treasure portion of this session, am I giving at the end of the month once the bills are paid and I know I have enough, or am I giving out of my first, right? So again, the design here, God doesn't need any of it. But what is this practice building? It is exercising a muscle of trust. I can choose to take matters into my own hand and harvest all of my fields and count the cost and do my budgeting and then potentially give a little bit to the Lord after that. Or I can give of the first and trust that He's going to provide the rest. Imagine the experience of life and time and this hamster wheel, like you said, Chris, of life. If I'm living a life of trust where I actually know that I have a provider God that's going to show up for me, or if I've never trusted in my life, the anxiety and the fear of every little thing that goes wrong when it's on me. This is the choice that the Israelites are commanded to take, right? So, I give you, and you reap that harvest, you shall bring that sheaf of first fruits to the priest, and you shall wave it in front of the Lord, that you may be accepted on that day. On the day after the Sabbath, you shall wave it. Again, this is offering, a thanks offering. And on that day when you wave the sheaf, you shall offer a male lamb a year old without blemish as a burnt offering to the Lord. And the grain offering shall be 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour with oil, a food offering to the Lord, pleasing aroma, and drink offering shall be of wine, 1/4 of a hin. And you shall eat neither bread nor grain, parched or fresh, until this same day, until you have brought the offering to the Lord. It is a statute forever throughout your generations in all of your dwellings. So again, you're not eating until you've brought that first to the Lord. So there's all of this symbolism in what God is having them do in a ritual, a rhythm, the physiology of it, right? The physical body, what not eating of it first, but bringing it to the Lord first, what that would cause you to learn about your relationship with God through living that out. Again, I'm not saying that we're going to practice all of these in modern times. This was to the Israelites. What I'm inviting you to wrestle with is God is taking a people out of slavery and he's trying to teach them, here's a new way to look at your time. Then the Feast of Weeks. Then you count 7 full weeks after the Sabbath. So again, it's like it's all built on each other. And there's timing to all of it. Present a grain offering, 2 loaves baked as first fruits. Present the bread, 7 lambs a year old. I won't get too much into the details of the offering. You shall offer a male goat as a sin offering, a peace offering. Priest shall wave them, the bread, the first fruits, the 2 lambs. And you shall make a proclamation on the same day. You shall have a holy convocation. You shall do no ordinary work. It is a statute forever in all your dwellings, places throughout your generations. Again, there's this pattern we keep seeing. Holy convocation, a statute forever, all of your generations, do no ordinary work. And when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap your field right up to the edge, nor shall you gather the gleanings after your harvest. You shall leave them for the poor and the sojourner. I am the Lord your God. This is that concept of margin. Do not reap all the way to the edge of your field. Do not go back and pick up all the things that you dropped. Leave it. Why? Because there's a sojourner, there's a widow, there's someone less fortunate. They're going to feed off it. But also, you don't need to squeeze every moment out of your life. If there's scarcity, there's only so much, we got to squeeze it. If there's abundance, I don't even have to harvest to the edge of my field. There's more than enough for me and the sojourner and the widow. I struggled with this a lot when I was reading this, preparing for this, because in my job right now, the majority of my stress does not come from, is this going to provide for my needs? Is this fulfilling? Right? Am I having fun? Am I doing okay? None of that stuff is all that stressful. What's stressful is I think I should be further along than I am. I think I need to squeeze and get more out of my career, be better and more successful. There's this hustle, this pressure of peak performance and maximization. That's where the majority of my stress comes from. If I can learn to adopt this lifestyle, I'm just not going to glean. I take 30 minutes in a given day and I screw off and mess around and don't do work. I feel terrible. I think like I've messed up and, is it really destroying my business? No. What if I had an attitude about time that there's enough? Right? There's plenty of other things we can see in the Bible about the type of lifestyle we should live where we shouldn't just be lazy. But again, it's this idea of like, if I'm going to harvest my field, I'm not going to go all the way to the edge. I'm not going to pick up every last ounce because I need every minute of it to survive. There's abundance. There's margin. So these practices, again, we're going to, just as in Romans it talks about being renewed or about transformed by the renewal of your mind, right? God was trying to renew the minds of these Israelites who are used to slavery. They were used to having no control over their time and being forced and whipped and beaten. Every last ounce of their energy being taken from them. So then we got the Feast of the Trumpets. Right now this is the 7th month, the first day of the month. Observe a day of solemn rest. Look at all this rest. Do no ordinary. It's a memorial proclaimed with a blast of trumpet, a holy convocation, no ordinary work. Present an offering to the Lord. Simple one. Now we've got the Day of Atonement. Massive, significant day, right? The 10th day of the 7th month. It's kind of somewhat in the middle of the year. Holy convocation. You shall afflict yourself. If you look at what afflict means, this is fasting. You're not eating. It's no fun. And present a food offering. You are fasting and presenting a food offering. Isn't that lovely? You shall do no ordinary work this very day, Day of Atonement. Make atonement for you before the Lord. And this is kind of interesting, the gravity of it. For whoever is not afflicted, whoever doesn't fast on the very day, shall be cut off from his people. God took this very seriously. And whoever does any work on that day, that person, I will destroy them from among his people. Again, there's a difference in the Old Testament God that we see this kind of severity, but he's taking this very seriously. Don't work, right? This is a meaningful thing in your life. I want to equip you with a lifestyle and a pattern and a rhythm to your life that's going to give you freedom. And the reality is, even if we didn't cut them off from the people and God didn't destroy them, they will destroy themselves in living a lifestyle apart from God. You shall do no work. This is statute throughout all generations, your dwelling places, Sabbath of solemn rest. Afflict yourself. And on the 9th day of the month, beginning at evening, again, the day always starts in the evening, you shall keep your Sabbath. And that has a lot of other significances of this scapegoat and all these sacrifices for the Day of Atonement. It was all about the unseen sins that went on. You know, if you had an actual sin, you would go do a sin offering or a guilt offering. But that Day of Atonement was to cover for all of the things that went on in the camp. Then we've got the Feast of Booths. I won't get into all of the details here. But what's interesting about the Feast of Booths is you go and live outside in a booth, or like you make an informal dwelling for 7 days. This was to remember that they were in the wilderness, and God brought them through the wilderness. Again, it's another memorial feast to remind them of what God did for them. That's another pattern. And also says, beside the Lord's Sabbath, and besides your gift, and beside the vow offerings, and beside the free will offerings, there's all these other offerings and things that you're bringing to the Lord all throughout this process. So, again, those are the 7 feasts. The other things they talk about, the Sabbath year, is verse 25, or chapter 25, right? When you come into the land that I give you, the land shall keep a Sabbath. So you're actually letting the land rest. There's actually a lot of implications to farming. If you don't do this, you end up overworking the land and harvesting nothing. So God is the creator and designer of everything. He's designed a need for rest even into the dirt. If you don't let the land rest, it will become infertile. Right? It will no longer grow anything. What happens to us when we don't allow ourselves to rest? For 6 years you shall sow the field, 6 years you shall prune the vineyard and its fruits. The 7th year shall be a Sabbath year. You will not sow your field or prune your vineyards. You shall not reap what grows of its self in your harvest, or gather the grapes of the undressed vine. It shall be a solemn rest for the land, a Sabbath to last. The Sabbath of the land shall provide food for you, for yourself and your male and female servants, hired workers. All its yield shall be your food. So again, you can still gather from the land and live off of it, but you're not working it. right? That's still going to produce something. And God's going to provide enough for you to have what you need. But imagine a year of rest. If you're an agrarian society, farming is what you do. Every 7th year is a year of rest. Imagine, I don't even know what that would have felt like. Obviously, be doing things. It's not a Sabbath year where you can do no ordinary work, but you can't work your fields. Again, that whole thing from Adam of the toil and the weeds and the thistles, right? You're gaining freedom from that, and you're not working it, and there's abundance. Bree?
What would they do? So those 6 years were probably, in my mind, I'm just thinking, they would probably, if they had rice, for example, they would store the rice, so in that 7th year, they wouldn't necessarily be working the fields, but they would have an abundance, and they would sell that for food, or use that for food. Is that kind of what they would do?
Yeah, they talk about that further in the after the year of Jubilee. Verse 20 in chapter 25 says, "And you say, what shall I eat on the 7th year, if I may not sow or gather our crop? I will command my blessing on you in the 6th year." This is pretty fascinating. I will command my blessing on you in the 6th year, so you will produce a crop sufficient for 3 years. When you sow on the 8th year, you will be eating the crop, some of the old crop. Because again, you're not sowing that 7th year. So you're going to be eating from that 6th year, and then that 8th year, you have to wait for that crop to actually be harvested. So you're still going to be eating from that 6th year. And you shall eat the old until the 9th year when the crop arrives. So that's later on. But the year of Jubilee, you shall count 7 weeks of years, 7 times 7, right? 49 years, loud trumpet. You shall consecrate that year, 50th year. It shall proclaim liberty through the land and to all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you, and each of you shall return to his property, and each shall return to his clan. You shall neither sow or reap and all those things, and you shall also, so it gets into your land, and it's also freeing slaves. So if you think about what this trains you to do I possess things? Right? And it literally talks about when you're purchasing land, it's based on the years until Jubilee. So if Jubilee is right around the corner, that land is cheaper, because what I'm paying for is the amount of crops I can harvest. I'm not actually going to own it. Right? So again, these type of things that God put into the lives of the Israelites would cause them to have a reality where they're holding loosely to things. I only have this land until the year of Jubilee. I give it back. This slave is not mine. They can serve me until I forgive all the debts and I set them free. Right? It's got such, there are such implications to how that impacts your lifestyle if these were actually part of your rhythms. Right? We have a rhythm of Christmas. We know what happens to our bank accounts and the implications of celebrating Christmas, right? That's a big deal. A lot of people have financial hardship in Christmas because of what our cultural things around that holiday require. And so this has its own type of requirements, its own type of rules and regulations and patterns. But what God was trying to teach them was freedom from sin. These patterns, these rhythms. You even look at when they were in the wilderness and the manna. God provided manna from heaven, and they had to get it in the morning. If they didn't, the sun would melt it away. And they weren't supposed to go on the 7th day. And they couldn't save it up. If you read through them, it's fascinating. Right? You can't store manna, or the next day it would stink and get worms, and everyone in the camp would be like, "Oh, Chris saved his manna." Right? What was that teaching them? Right? All of these things about this food is going to be enough, and tomorrow there will be more. There's daily bread for me today. Everything about our sense of security and anxiety and more for me, and I've got to fight, and I don't have my Roth IRA all set up for retirement, versus I have a Lord that provides for me. It's not that I'm unwise and I'm blowing all my resources and wasting it away, but I've had the privilege in my life to be raised by missionary families where my dad's side was actually really great at money, my mom's side as well, but I know that they did not plan as well as they could have. And there was always moments of apparent need where God provided everything they needed. My mom, in hearing stories of how she grew up, knowing my grandparents while they were alive, they were never in need. And they did not follow any of the wise financial protocol that a financial advisor might say, you must have these things in place. On the other hand, I coach a lot of really financially successful people. And there are things where they've built enormous companies and they've had a business partner cheat them and lose it all. Is there really any security that we can create for ourselves and hold on to for ourselves? No, right? There's an illusion. The economy can change. The dollar might no longer be the world's economy or world's currency. What happens now to your, investment accounts? I don't know. So again, this is the world's definition of security and what we want to do with our time. And I need to work really hard and retire early so I can finally have freedom, right? Or do I want to trust the Lord in that, have freedom right now, have freedom tomorrow, take a Sabbath this week, celebrate God's rest on a regular basis in my life, and not carry that burden of stress and anxiety? Because that's what this lie of time that the world preaches is doing to us. And God is saying, here's a gift. Sabbath is for man, not man for the Sabbath. We see Jesus confront that in the New Testament, where they were making all these rules about the Sabbath and making it super strict. And Jesus was like, this is not a rule for you to follow or you're in trouble. This is a gift for you. Sabbath was designed for man. So again, what you want to do with that in terms of your own lifestyle, study it. Dig into this. Ask the questions, right? Seek the Lord. But I think there's a lot of truth to what God's Word outlines. And these practices, these rhythms, so much of what I can do to gain success in a client's life is creating healthy habits and rhythms. If they're waking up at a consistent time, they're going to the gym regularly, they're, have a schedule, like so much of their performance improves just by these regular rhythms and habits. And what would it mean for me to build my life around God versus planning my ideal schedule and trying to fit God into my life? It's just a different paradigm of how I treat each and every day. And that's the invitation of what leads to abundant time, because you can stress and worry and try to squeeze every ounce out of every day and still fall short, still be lacking. Work your whole life away and still get at a point where you can never retire. Or you can live in a life where it really doesn't make sense. When I was going to Impact and I was trying to fill out a housing application, my roommate was like, Peter, how have you been paying for rent? Starting to proof of income. And I was like adding up, I was like, I don't know. The math doesn't make sense, right? There was something else going on. There was another level of provision in my life in that season. And that's the God that we serve. But if I am in control and I can provide for myself and I don't need the Lord, why would he ever show up? That's why these exercises of trust, the concept of first fruits, the concept of Sabbath, it's so hard to stop because I think there's only so much. And if I don't take advantage of this moment, it's going to go away. One of the most powerful pictures of this concept of scarcity was when I went to Haiti for the first time. This was the little plane flying to Haiti. But I was supposed to be here 2 weeks. We ended up being here 2 days and getting evacuated by the UN. That's a different story. There was mobs and stuff like that. But we had some fun pictures in the 2 days. But one of the activities we did was we made these balloons for these kids. And I want to help you picture this. There was this little facility, this 2-story house where we were feeding kids. And then me and my friend Steven were in the back pumping up balloons. I think he was pumping them up, I was tying them, and I was handing them to the kids. Plenty of balloons, an abundance of balloons. Every kid had a balloon. But what we saw that started happening is this crowd that started pressing in. And there was I don't know what it was, there was this little wall this high, this little square. I think it was supposed to be for water. They would fill it up with water, but it was empty. So Stephen and I ended up climbing behind this wall to try to keep the kids out because they were pressing in. And every time we wouldn't even have the balloon pumped, they'd be ripping the balloon to try to get it. And I was taking these kids and lifting them up and getting them outside of the box and trying to give enough space because Stephen couldn't even pump the balloon because they were so desperate. They thought if I didn't get a balloon right now, I'm not going to get one. And mothers were carrying their kids and reaching over and trying to get a balloon because they thought if I didn't get a balloon now, I'm not going to get one. There was this ingrained level of scarcity based on the lifestyle that they'd lived in the most impoverished country in the Western Hemisphere. That was a real experience of just how bad scarcity is. And I just wanted to tell these kids, wait, there's plenty. Just give us a minute. And we weren't even able to pump up the balloons because they were fighting for their lives to get a balloon. And they were fighting each other. If you got it, that meant I wasn't going to get one. And so often, this is how we treat things in our lives. People in social media are posting things, and they went off and got married. Where's mine? Right? There's not enough. It's scarce. I don't have enough time. And we're always comparing ourselves on these things that really, God wants to provide us freedom. He wants to provide us abundance. And He wants to give us abundant time. He wants us to live our life. Jesus changed the world in 33 years. If I was Jesus, I'd be getting crucified pretty soon. That's it for me, right? He launched His ministry in a couple of years. It wasn't a lot of time. What God did in that time was tremendous. And what God can do in the time that we give Him in our life, even if it's just a little time, because some of us don't give Him very much, is incredible. So that's our challenge. If we want to have abundant life, let's start creating patterns, rhythms, rituals. Again, so many of these in the Bible were celebrate, feast, get everyone together, do no work, right? These aren't these strict rules to hold us down. He had to command the people to stop working very strictly because we have this desire within us where we want to take control. We want to own our own destiny. And the moment that we let go of that and release it to God and trust Jesus as our Savior and our King, that's when we have freedom and abundance. So for next week, this is the verse I want us to think about for our talent. Another good Old Testament scripture. You guys know about Bezalel and Aholiab? No one knows. Bible trivia. Bezalel, Aholiab. No?
Perfect children name for sure.
Yeah. This is the Bezalel and Aholiab. These are the first, I believe it's the first mention of the Holy Spirit empowering someone to do something.
Oh, wow.
These were craftsmen that helped build the tabernacle. Those two specifically. But what's very fascinating here, right? And Moses called Bezalel and Aholiab and every craftsman in whose mind the Lord had put skill. Fascinating way to word that. In whose mind the Lord had put skill. Right? Where is our talent coming from? Right? Who put that in your mind? Who gave you that gift? Everyone whose heart stirred him up to come do the work. There's a desire. The heart was stirred up. Who did the stirring? Right? To help them do the work. And this is really the verse here about talent. This kind of gets into treasure. And they received from Moses all the contribution that the people of Israel had brought for doing the work of the sanctuary. They still kept bringing him free will offerings every morning. If you keep reading, eventually it says the craftsmen stopped doing their work and they told Moses, "We have more than enough. Tell them to stop bringing offerings." But I didn't include all that because that gets into talent or treasure. But I want you guys to think about this and this concept of God was raising up craftsmen to build at. If you read the whole chapter, it talks about women and weaving together these blue, purple, and fine twined linens to put all this stuff together. But it's a fascinating example of what it means to use our talent for God's kingdom. So, thank you all. Happy to talk through questions or anything that's on your mind with time. We ended a few minutes early. But, yeah.
So good.
I enjoy getting a chance to do this.
So really quick, so like just summarizing, because I'm hungry and things like that. So like when you're talking about abundant time, abundant time is just doing what God asks us to do with our time. And part of that is to work, but part of that is to rest. So as we're being with, or as we follow God in His Word, that creates abundant time. Is that kind of like?
Yeah, so the summary is basically, it's more of getting, like we talked about first time, with the lens of time. And it's choosing, as you read the Bible more and more, you'll consistently see perspectives on time that create a worldview about time that's different than what we are wired to believe with news and all of the things in the world. So, again, Bree, the example today is I wanted to highlight the power of actual practices in our physical life. Something like a morning quiet time where in the morning when my brain is vulnerable, it's just woken up out of a dream state. It doesn't even know what's going on. I'm just getting into consciousness. Am I going to pick up my phone and feed it negativity and news and comparison and social media? Or am I going to turn that off? These emails are going to be there later. I don't have to answer this now. I've literally had coaching clients that would wake up in the middle of the night, check their phone, and then all of a sudden feel like they had to get up and answer these emails because they were ruled by this work, right? They would go on these trips and go to all-inclusive resorts and spend the whole time in the hotel room getting work done because they were so anxious about these deadlines. These are people working in the real estate industry where it's like things have to close and there's these pressures. And again, I've coached people in those same industries that have freedom and boundaries. And people that, again, I like that video where it's like they lived under the slavery. And again, now it's not Egypt. It's this slavery we create for ourselves, for our excess. We are already in the top 1% of the world. And again, it is expensive to live here, don't get me wrong. But most of my stressors is not how to put food on my table and how to live securely in a house. It's like, how do I make $1 million? How do I get that bigger house? How do I have more square footage? There are all these things that I'm subjecting myself to slavery. And it's all here. And God's saying that doesn't matter. Your time is more worth other things. When I was in college, my dad told me, he said, son, find a church where you can serve and find a family. And my natural response was, I didn't tell him this, but I was like, Dad, I have to pay for school and get good grades. Why would I volunteer my time to a church? I didn't get ministry. It wasn't until after college and I went through a personal trauma, got counseling, and my therapist talked all about how healthy people in church community don't need to talk to me. And I was like, huh. And I was like, and again, nothing against people see therapy. I think it's really healthy, and I will continue to see therapists every so often because I'll need it. But that opened my eyes, so maybe there's something more here to what my dad was telling me to do than me volunteering my time. And when I started serving, I realized, wow, this is for me. It seems crazy. I'm like, I'm giving of myself, I'm helping others, this feels good, and I'm getting something out of it. And so again, God's economy is completely different. The way time functions in God's world is entirely different. He's going to take your pathetic, simple talents and your weakness, and he's going to make his glory known through that. All we have to do is give it to him. And so with our time, what that looks like from today is we've got to give him our time instead of me being sovereign and the ruler over my time and I decide what I do when. I'm trusting a king who's going to be the boss. If someone tells me to do something or I want to make some decision about where do I go, who am I seeking counsel from? Am I bringing that before the Lord, right? Or who's in charge of my time and what I do with it? And again, it's priorities. Primarily is how we manage time. We don't control how long, but is this more important than that? Because like you said earlier, Bree, there's not enough time for all of it. And that's the anxieties. There's too much. We actually live in so much abundance that it's overwhelming. And that's what we struggle with, is this is good, this is good, this is good. What do I do, right? And that's where the relationship with God comes in. And he can help you see the priorities and say, none of it. Do nothing this weekend. Rest, read your Bible, do something that makes you come alive, invite some people over, spend time in healthy community, make dinner for them, enjoy their company, right? That's what's actually going to bring life and abundance, not, I'm going to get caught up on some emails, because my inbox just gets bigger and bigger. So I don't know if that was a good summary, but I expanded.
Sorry. I was just making sure I was catching what you're doing.
Picking up what you're putting down.